Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today, we are here to announce that the Toronto Police Service has arrested an individual for the 1983 murders of Erin Gilmour and Susan Tice. Last Thursday, November 24th, this individual was arrested and taken into custody in Moosonee, Ontario, and brought back to Toronto on Friday, November 25th. Joseph George Sutherland, 61 years of age, of Moosonee, has been charged under the 1983 Criminal Code with 2 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Erin Gilmour and Susan Tice. As relieved as we are to announce this arrest, it will never bring back Erin or Susan. And on behalf of the Toronto Police Service, I want to again express my condolences to their families, including Erin's brothers Sean and Kaylin McCowan, who are here with us today. Since the tragic murders of these 2 women back in 1983, Toronto Police homicide detectives have never stopped investigating these reprehensible crimes or seeking to find the person responsible. Susan Tice, 45, was murdered on August 17, 1983. Susan was discovered deceased by a relative in the upstairs bedroom of her residence, sexually assaulted and suffering from numerous stab wounds. Erin Gilmour, 22 years of age, was arrested on December 20, 1983. She was found deceased in her bedroom by a friend that evening, also sexually assaulted and suffering from numerous stab wounds. It was in the year 2000 that detectives were able to link the 2 murders of one unknown suspect thanks to DNA left at the scenes. Shortly after that, in 2008, Toronto Police announced a $200,000 reward for any information that might lead to an arrest. In 2016, we again made another appeal for information about these crimes, reminding people about the reward, but again, it was met with no success. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Toronto Police investigators were using advances in DNA technology to begin narrowing down a list of suspects. This was painstaking work which Detective Sergeant Steve Smith from our cold case unit will speak about shortly. We are proud to say, at the very least, that the persistence and dedication of our investigators, some of our investigators, some retired, others who have passed away, who never gave up finding the individual responsible. For our investigators, the victims and their families are never forgotten. I want to thank and recognize the members of our Homicide and Missing Persons Unit, and in particular, our cold case team and forensic identification team, past and present, for their steadfast commitment over so many years to bring this person to justice. This demonstrates that the Toronto Police Service will never give up on finding people who commit crimes in our city. Thank you, and I would like now to invite Detective Steve Smith up to provide some remarks.
Thank you, Chief. My name's Steve Smith. I'm with the Homicide and Missing Persons Unit, cold case. First of all, I'd like to reiterate what the Chief said. I'd like to thank our team. They were very diligent in their investigations over the past 3 years. Our investigators, our genealogists, our forensics officers, and I'd like to thank the Ontario Provincial Police for all their support as well. They've helped us out immensely in this investigation. We'd also like to thank the Solicitor General's Office. They provided us with a grant for community safety and policing, specific to genetic genealogy. This has helped us to hire investigators, genealogists that work full-time that help us with genetic genealogy. So we're going to speak to the advances in science that helped us with this case. Obviously, it's been 39 years, and numerous investigators have worked on this case. Going through this case, I'll tell you that the only way that this was solved was the advances in science. We're able to use investigative genetic genealogy to narrow down a suspect family, and from there, we're able to narrow down a suspect who is obviously under arrest today. Now, that suspect has been in Ontario for 39 years since these murders, so obviously we're going to look into every possible connection to any possible case throughout Ontario to ensure that he isn't responsible for any other offenses. But the IGG in this case has just showed us that previously unsolvable cases are now solvable by the advances with science. This case into itself is probably the most complex case that I've ever worked in my 25 years. We sent this down to Othram Inc. for SNP testing at the same time that we sent the Jessup DNA down. So this is how much longer this has taken to solve this case. It just goes to show that IGG is not a magic bullet, but it does provide us the ability to continue working this case and to follow the evidence to lead us to the suspect. Just in continuation, we're speaking about the investigation and we're speaking about the accused, but this case is really about the victims, about Susan and Erin. And saying that, I'd like to invite Erin's brother, Sean McGowan, to the podium.
Good morning, and thank you very much. I'm Sean McCowan, and I'm here with my brother, Kaylin, and Erin was our sister. On behalf of Erin's family and many, many friends, we're all very, very happy that an arrest has obviously been made in the vicious murders of Erin and Susan Tice. The last few days have brought around a full spectrum of emotions, as you can imagine, and this is a day that I and we have been waiting almost an entire lifetime for. In a sense, there's a real relief that someone's been arrested, yet it also brings back so many memories of Erin and her brutal, senseless murder. Erin was our sister, she was a daughter, and she was an amazing friend to everyone around her. She had a magnetic personality, was a natural beauty, and was always full of life and looking for her next adventure and bringing people together. At the age of 22, she had her whole life ahead of her before she was killed 5 days before Christmas. She'd never had a chance to be an aunt to her 4 nieces and 3 nephews. She never had a chance to live her life, never get married, never be a mother, and never had a chance to see what could have been. It was an incredible life to be lived that was taken away from her and the rest of us. We will always wonder what could have been and miss her presence and miss growing old with her. This arrest finally brings an answer for all of us to almost 39 years of asking who. Our mom, Anna, passed away 2 years ago, and she would have been so relieved that there had been an arrest, and so happy that someone will finally face justice after being anonymous for 39 years. Erin's murder stayed with her, and it was very, very difficult for her to talk about it. She lost her only daughter, and she missed Erin every day. It finally puts a name and a face to someone who, for all of us, has been a ghost. It's truly incredible we are here today. I don't want to say that any of us ever gave up hope, but almost over 4 decades, we began to wonder if we would ever get to this resolution. We're so thankful that technology finally caught up and provided the incredible detectives at TPS a new set of clues and ultimately an answer. We cannot thank the detectives at Cold Case enough. We owe many thanks to so many over the years, and I'm sure I'm missing some, but Rocky Cleveland, Vaughn O'Toole, Ray Zarb, Greg Groves, Reg Pitts, David Gracie, Bob Wilkinson, Steve Ryan, and of course, Stacy Gallant, Andrew Groves, Steve Smith, who I owe special thanks to for taking my calls and answering my questions, and every time saying, we just need more time. Until just a few days ago when I received the best call I've ever received. You all never gave up on trying to solve this case, and we are grateful beyond anything we can ever express. I'd also like to thank all the people and techs at Parabon Labs and Othram for their dedication to allowing the science to help resolve these painful chapters in our lives. As well, many thanks to all the journalists we've spoken to over the years who helped keep Erin's case present and relevant. Erin and Susan are finally getting their day.
Thank you, Sean, for your words and your faith in us. So, for all homicide investigators, there's a credo that states, and I quote, "No greater honor will ever be bestowed on an officer or a profound duty imposed on them than when they are entrusted with the investigation of the death of a human being," end quote. The original investigators, Rocky Cleveland and Vaughn O'Toole, and many dedicated detective and detective sergeants, past and present, know this honor. They believe it, they live it. And they live it not just for a day or a week or a month. They live it until the case is solved. Our fine officers will continue to work these cases, and they will continue to be professionally relentless, this and every day. And we're all grateful for their dedication to not only their craft, but to the citizens of this city. We'll now open for questions, please, and thank you.
I have a question for Deputy Smith, please. Hi.
Hi.
Catherine McDonald from Global News. Tell us what you can about the accused, please, Mr. Sutherland.
There's a publication ban before the court, so I can't tell you too much, but he is 61 years old, and he was living in Moosonee now. At the time of the murders, he was living in Toronto, but he's moved throughout Ontario during the last 39 years, resulting in him living in Moosonee at this point.
Can you just tell us a little bit about what he was doing with his life for the last 4 decades?
You know what? That's all under investigation right now. We want to make sure that we cover everything off before we put it out to the media.
Sean, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Thank you for your acknowledgement.
Yeah, of course.
That meant a lot. As the deputy said, you had faith in the Toronto Homicide Squad, and you did that when I was in charge of. As the deputy said, you had faith in the abilities and the dedication of the investigators that conducted this investigation. And you had that same dedication and faith when I was the officer in charge of this investigation. And what does that say to you as far as never giving up? And that's something you and I spoke about many times. And to other families out there who are waiting for that same phone call from the detective sergeant, what would you say to them, those that are living on the edge waiting? Is that case ever going to be solved? That person who killed my loved one? What you went through for 39 years now, what would you say?
Well, I think as Steve alluded to and the chief, you know, the technology finally got us to a space where it allowed the detectives here to be able to pursue this guy. Without that, I'm not sure that we ever would have found this individual. You know, he was literally a ghost. It was, you know, not someone on the radar, and you know, I don't think we ever gave up hope that the detectives here would ever stop looking at it. You know, you never did, the team never did, and it's been passed down through the team for almost 4 decades, right? And so that really speaks to the doggedness of Toronto Police. It also speaks to maintaining faith and just wanting to get to the final resolution and get a final answer at the end of the day to get justice for Erin and Susan Tice and others out there. This technology is incredible in that it's going to allow a lot of unsolved cases to get sort of hopefully push farther down the road and open up new avenues for them all. So.
And my follow-up, thank you for answering that. My follow-up, what struck me when I interviewed you over the years was your loyalty to your sister. What do you say to her?
Well, I think, Steve, that you know, as I've said many times over the years, this is something she would have done for me, and I think you know, our family never wanted to give up on her, and never let her memory sort of, for lack of a better word, never wanted this case to be, you know, sitting on a shelf in a warehouse and just never be followed up. And as I said, you know, so many thanks go to Toronto Police for sort of being able to push this forward, and not let it sit on a shelf and be unresolved. You know, and it's a thrilling, for lack of a better word, it's a thrilling day for our family, our friends, and everyone involved to finally get here. And as I said, I think Erin would be, you know, my mom, Erin, everyone would be so happy that we finally got this answer after all these years.
Detective, could you please talk about that technology, how it works, how you got to here?
The process of IGG?
Yeah, what is it?
So basically, we take DNA that's left at a crime scene. We send it down to, well, I mean, there's a number of labs, but in this case, we used Othram because they use the best possible technology, which is full genome testing. We send it down to be changed into, instead of an STR match, which we use at CFS, it's a SNP test, a single nucleotide polymorphism. So that allows us to use the genes between the genes to have familial connectivity, and we're able to use that to utilize people that have uploaded their DNA to family tree DNA, and we utilize that to develop family trees, and we have to develop our trees backwards to find the most recent common ancestors, and then we have to find out how the families are intertwined through marriage or birth, and bring it down towards our suspect. At that point, we switch back to regular STR testing where we do one-to-one matches through CFS to ensure that we have the proper person.
You go to the accused and ask him for a DNA sample at some point.
Yes, we obtain the accused DNA sample at some point.
Detective, you said that you're going to investigate to see if the suspect is responsible for other crimes, other murders, sexual assaults in the last 40 years. This is someone who committed 2 sexual assaults and murders alleged to have within months back in 1983. A, how do you go about that? And B, do you believe that he could be responsible given what his pattern was?
I mean, I'd just be speculating at this point, but there is 39 years. This was a 4-month window, so you can do your own math on that. There is that possibility. We're going to look into every prospect of that throughout Ontario, not just in Toronto. Luckily, with the Jessup matter, we have already gone through that process where we were able to take that and look at the person that was found to be responsible for the Jessup murder, and we had to go back in their life and go through everything in their life over the course of the 40 years. So we've got a process for that, and we're going to do that. We'll be contacting all the other services in Ontario where we believe that he's resided or visited, and we'll be going through all the cases all the way back for 39 years.
How were you able to get Hoover in 2020 and Sutherland took an extra 2 years? What was the missing element?
So one of my genealogists likes to say that genealogy is like fishing. You never know how long it's going to take you to catch a fish. We utilize our process, and there's a lot of different things that come into that. It depends how many people are up on the sites that we can utilize, because there's only 2 sites we can utilize for genetic genealogy, how much open source data there is. And in this case, because he was born in a small town, we had endogamy to work with. So we had to work through a process of endogamy to bring the centimorgan matches down to where they should be. They were showing too big of a match there. So we had to work through that process. And then it also depends on the size of families as well. So there's a lot of variables that go into that.
Can I ask, we've seen convictions under this science in the past year in Canada, but these have all been guilty pleas. So the public is not in a position to see defense lawyers who may try to impugn the technique on collective privacy, on the charter, on the notion that the techniques you're using could be considered unlawful under, in a robust defense argument. So how confident are you that if there was a robust defense argument presented along those lines, this would get reviewed?
Oh, I'm very confident. In Toronto, we've developed a very stringent set of rules that we utilize for this process. This isn't something that we just do. We've developed our own set of rules, and we stay within that process. If our case does not fit in that process, we don't utilize that case. So we stick to that case, we stick to that process, and we're confident that if it's tested in court, we'll be able to defend it.
Sergeant Smith, can you describe what the moment of the arrest, the circumstances of that?
He was actually arrested by the OPP for us. There was no issue with the arrest. He was taken into custody. There was no issues whatsoever, and we went up and picked him up.
Does he have family?
Where in Toronto? You say where in Toronto?
That he was arrested? He was arrested in Moosonee, Ontario.
You said he moved to Toronto recently.
No, he was living in Toronto at the time of the offenses.
Oh, I see. And he moved back to Moosonee.
He moved back to Moosonee, yeah.
Can I just first off say congratulations on, that's extraordinary work what you and your team have done. Can you comment on the powerful message that not only does this send to suspects who are out there that should probably be sleeping with one eye open, but to those families, as I commented earlier, that are waiting for that phone call. The deputy said it so well, where you never do give up, and you literally never do give up. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely, Steve. You know the number of cases that we have in Toronto, and our team's in contact with the families of most of the victims on a regular basis. And that's really dependent on the family. Sometimes it's weekly, sometimes it's monthly, sometimes it's yearly, depending on the contact that they want with us. But yeah, any of these cases now are open to being solved. Will we solve all of them? Probably not, but we're going to give it our go. We will do everything that we can to solve every case that we possibly can.
Does the suspect have a family?
He does.
Can you explain that? Is there a wife or kids? Is he married?
Well, I don't want to get into his actual, but yes, he did have a family, and he has a family, an extended family, most of them living in Northern Ontario as well.
And who's the family member that the DNA went back to? How does that
Well, I don't think you're understanding the process. It's not necessarily that it goes back to a family member. We're able to utilize the DNA from the scene to identify a familial unit. From there, we're able to narrow it down to the possible suspect. It doesn't mean necessarily that any of his family's DNA was on file.
Can you say whether the suspect was ever previously interviewed by police or considered a suspect in relation to these two cases, or was his name a surprise?
No, he was not in our boxes, as they say. He was not a suspect or a person of interest in this case. If we hadn't utilized this technology, we never would have came to his name.
Just to clarify, there was a question about did he give his DNA? Am I correct to assume that you get his DNA, you surreptitiously get his DNA, or do you go to him for a sample?
I'll tell you, in this one, we served him with a DNA warrant.
There's a picture of him in an orange jumpsuit. Is that a picture taken last week, or is that a historic picture?
No, that's a picture of him taken upon his arrest.
And where is he now before the criminal justice system? Has it been before the courts? Is there a bail hearing?
It'll be in the media release, but he has a court case in early December in Toronto.
And just in terms of this tonight, this is 40 years ago. So you guys would have in your, I think the brother mentioned that he's glad the sample isn't sitting on a shelf somewhere, but you guys would have tens of thousands of samples of bodily fluids in your archives that are now open to interpretation from other cases. I mean, so how do you prioritize these cold cases from a cold case perspective? Is it homicides, sexual assaults? How are you going to go with that?
I wish we had tens of thousands of DNA samples. It's a finite number of cases that actually have DNA, and even a smaller amount that has offender DNA. So that's part of our process for this, is we have to be 100% sure that the DNA we're utilizing is the actual offender. Because as you know, in these crime scenes, there's numerous DNA samples that could be there, but we have to be convinced, and that's why we chose this case and the Jessup case as our first two cases, because unequivocally there's no way that the person involved in this could justify the fact that their DNA is at the scene.
Detective Smith, what was his reaction when police showed up at his door after 39 years?
I don't want to get into it too much, but as Steve was saying, I think when you commit these crimes, you're just waiting for that knock to come at the door. So you'd have to speak to him inevitably, but if I could sense it, it would probably be one of relief that it's finally over.
Detective, can you confirm that this is the same George Sutherland that won the lottery 2 years ago?
I've been asked that question a few times, and I don't have the answer to that. Just so you know that there's a lot of people with the same names up in that area, so it could be, it could not be. I don't have that answer right now.
How many cases are you working on right now with DNA technology?
So we have over 700 cold cases. Of that, we have 43 that have known offender DNA. Right now, utilizing the Solicitor General's grant, we're able to put 15 Toronto cases forward and 15 cases from the rest of Ontario forward per year. So over the 3-year grant, we'll be able to put 45 cases. Now, saying that, we have a mix of unidentified human remains, sexual assaults, and homicide cases that we're working on, but that's the approximation. And we're in the first year of the grant, so we're just in the about 15 cases that we're putting forward.
That little girl was found in the dumpster. Okay. Was that little girl that was found in the dumpster, is she one of them?
I don't want to comment on other investigations. Thank you.
That was the last question. This concludes the conference for today. Thank you for joining us.